Have you failed at anything in your life? Great, then this podcast is for you. My name is Jan Crystal, and I'm an entrepreneur who has failed many times. The good thing is, I learned from every time I failed. Join me as I talk with experts in their respective fields on how they were able to elevate from failure. On this first episode, we'll dive into the dark side of mental health in sports. I'm your host, Jan Crystal, and today our guest is Dwayne Morton, a former international basketball player who teaches people how to overcome adversity. All right, welcome everyone to the Brody Vlog Learn, Love, Elevate podcast. I'm your host, Jan, and I have a special guest, Dwayne Morton. Welcome, Dwayne.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Want to thank your listeners for giving me your time and allowing me to share some stories with you, because I believe time is such a valuable asset. And so I just wanted to thank your listeners.
Appreciate you being here, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Dark Side of Mental Health in Sports, a deep dive into tennis, basketball, and more. We have Dwayne on here who is an expert in basketball, and I myself in tennis. I've played tennis since I was little. I played in USTA events. So I definitely know the good side, the ugly side as well of tennis. And I wanted to go over today, and I'll put it on the screen, a Facebook post that I saw that really inspired today's episode. Right, so if you guys don't know who Andrei Rublev is, he is a Russian professional tennis player on the ATP Tour. He's had great success. Unfortunately, oftentimes he is unable to control his emotions, although, again, he's had great success. He's won tournaments, he's super popular with fans. But I saw this post on Instagram and it really struck a chord with me. And I'm someone who has been in a place where, both with tennis and in life, where I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to be myself. I wanted to be somebody else. I wanted to be better. So Andrei Rublev said, I didn't see the reason of living life. My thoughts were killing me. Rublev said that he felt so badly last year that he didn't see the point of living life. But he stopped taking antidepressant pills and now works with a psychologist. Since this podcast is called Learn, Love, Elevate, we're going to go over these three things with Dwayne and give you guys some tips and offer a deep dive into not only the dark side of the mental health in sports, but offer a silver lining for that.
I would say, I've had to overcome adversity a lot. I feel like I'm an expert at overcoming adversity. I've overcome adversity twice in just big life circumstances. So I was diagnosed with a blood cancer at 29, and then I was also involved in a police shooting about 3 years ago. And then the other part of it is I found out last year that I was misdiagnosed. And so just to give your listeners a better understanding, I feel like I was able to go through that because of sports. So sports taught me the resiliency and being persistent. And so I feel like when you start taking and looking at life obstacles and you apply them to sports, but you apply them as a kid to your life, don't get over complex. That's the other thing. I feel like I feel a lot of people overcomplicate things. We need to just simplify it as much as possible. So what happens is when you are under scrutiny so much as that gentleman, the tennis player was, like it eats at you. And so you need to know, and I'm glad that he's actually working with, some sports psychologist or something like that. Because what I tell every athlete that I work with, there's two things with basketball. You're either going to make the shot or you're going to miss the shot. Those are the two outcomes. And so never expect anything else other than those two outcomes. Like and when you do miss a shot, you'll have other opportunities to make a shot. And so I feel like that's the other part. And so I always tell my athletes every time, the sun comes up, the sun comes goes down. That's a universal law. And so really look and keep focused on that universal law. Also, you probably have someone that really loves you and really cares about you. some family member or something like, and just hold on to that like unconditional love. For me, I was able to use my spiritual side and know God loved me. And so that was what allowed me to play way more freely rather than worrying about my mistakes and stuff like that. So I feel like when you start looking at it and simplifying it, it actually helps the complex stuff get easier and more able to deal with it. And so the other point of it is like they have so many people that are like pulling at them all the time. And so the other thing, Jan, is like I know pro race car drivers, pro football players, pro baseball players, pro basketball players. There's usually an outlet that there's something they usually go to get away from the pressure. Some people gamble, some people drink, some people play cards, some people do, play video games. Video games right now is probably one of the bigger ones. And so as long as you have an outlet, then it's usually um, it's pretty well managed. But when you let's say for someone who makes a mistake and it's a big mistake and you have a lot of fans, I always tell people basketball made me understand that there was 50% of people that loved me at that time, 50% of the people that hated me because like the other team didn't like me. But the people who loved you can turn on you on a dime on stuff. You make a mistake, cost people a game. And so that's the thing. Once you realize that that is the case, it's not an unconditional love, then under no circumstances expect that. Do never expect unconditional love in a relationship, like in real life, like any type of relationship, a coach, anything. It's all conditional love. And so always focus on your unconditional love part.
That's awesome. And I love how sports parallels life. And I remember watching, this was a couple years ago, or maybe last year. These were high school students, I forget what it's called, but high school students that were vying for scholarships at big universities like Duke. This is basketball, like Duke and all the big universities. There was one kid that played with LeBron or something. So these were like the cream of the crop, but they interviewed one kid and he said, you know what, I've learned just to be in the process because, waiting for a decision from a university, it could be really nerve-wracking. It can take away from the love of the game and, being so young. So, so maybe what advice do you have? And I think that kind of being in the moment of like, okay, I can either make the shot or not. I can either win the game or not, but maybe along like something else on like how athletes deal with the pressure of like managing their money and, making sure they have a job next season, or if they're abroad and they want to stay abroad.
You have a team. I mean, for me, is like I have a financial advisor as I have someone who does my life insurance. I have somebody who does these different things for me. Same thing is like if I'm not good with it, you got to find that person. So what usually happens though is these athletes get people that are in their circle who are not experts. And that's usually who takes them. So it's usually a family member or a friend. And so it's just a ton of temptation when you look at it from that aspect is like, um, if I had a personal friend that I grew up with and they didn't know anything about taxes, my common sense just say they shouldn't do my taxes.
Yeah.
That's just I need to go get expert. And I believe that's what happens with a lot of athletes. They want to help other people get out of that situation. And so they take people who aren't qualified. So you got to really look at the qualifications. Then also sometimes, even though you trust the people, you still got to go check them. It has to be quality checks. And I feel like a lot of those people um, don't check because they're like they honestly don't want to know. That's the other thing. They don't want to know. Oh, so yeah. So if I go hire somebody who's underqualified and I don't check them, it would be like if I was going out and I was trying to buy a house and I went on a spending spree and I was like, I don't really know my credit score, and I don't check it. So I don't want, just because you're not aware of something doesn't mean that's okay. And so I feel like that's part of it too, from just a psychological aspect, is that people feel like if they're not aware of it, it doesn't happen. And so that's another aspect. It's like all these things are mindset things, and they all come back to those limiting beliefs. And so when you look at it from that point and you keep them super simple, it's all comes down to really common sense. So that's the other part of why most of these people make a lot of money and then they mismanage it. So, I mean, let's look at compare it to like say Amazon. They're managed very well. So if I was competing with Amazon on the in an e-com store and I didn't have the organization that Amazon has, what would happen? It would fail. That's the whole
Yeah.
point. You have to be able to manage. You have to understand management. And if you don't understand management, go get a manager. Go get a person than you. I feel like that is part of the process of especially when you have large sums of money. And so I'm a really big believer in getting mentors in those areas that I'm not good at.
Mentors and having a team with you is so important. Even in individual sports, when these athletes win, they always thank their team. And I think that's a great parallel for business. Somebody may, they might be a solopreneur, but in order to really get to the next level and elevate, you need people on your side, whether it's an assistant, a mentor, advisors, tax advisors, things like that. So that's a great point. So I want to take this time to have Dwayne talk about his business and what he does for people to overcome adversity. So Dwayne, would you like to?
So I'm the CEO of Show Up to Win. So I created Show Up to Win because I went through some adversity, and so I teach people how to overcome adversity the same way that I did, and so I show them how I was able to deal with it. And these adversities were very unlikely and very untimely too. That's the other thing. And so I'm looking for athletes or ex-athletes that are dealing with those type of stressors. So like I'm looking for either the ex-athlete who their fire like got burnt out and they need to be relit. And so that would be the ex-athlete or like so if someone got diagnosed who had that athletic mindset, that those are my type of people. And then also there's a mental performance side where I help uh, all kinds of athletes that are in different sports, and I help give them just different mindset tools to make them better. And so, like, I have high school players that are wanting to get to collegiate level and that are dreaming about professional level, and so I'm helping those people every day. And so I have that aspect of it, and then I also have another aspect where I have such a big giving heart, and so I'm not trying, I'm attempting to create this nonprofit. I actually have a really good partnership with a debt consolidation company. So, Jan, most people aren't aware that they have, that 60% of Americans have over 20K of credit card debt. And there's actually programs that are actually out there that you can find that will actually help eliminate that.
Listen to part 2 of this episode on the next video.